Hey guys, it's me, cyoubx, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how to make a good cube review. Just like the other videos that I made in the past, I am not saying that my videos are good or that my reviews are good. The point of view that I'm actually taking on this particular video is as a viewer. So I watch a lot of YouTube videos, I watch a lot of other people do reviews, and there are some things that I like, but there are a lot of things that I don't like when I watch reviews, and there are some times when I actually don't finish a video just because things bother me so much. And this video is intended to help you make better reviews. Let's get started. So first and foremost, I'm going to be talking about content, because as far as how you edit your videos and the angles you want to use and all of that, that's very artistic and very individualized. So it's not my responsibility to tell you how to do those things. So actually this video is going to focus only on the content of your review and certain things to look out for. So the first thing and the most important thing about making a review is being honest. Because if you're not honest about your reviews, people aren't going to trust you, and it's going to be a one-time deal. People are going to watch a review, they might like it, but then when they find out you lied or that you weren't completely honest, then you have a problem, because people just lose respect for you. So the first thing, the most important thing, is you want to be honest. And this really goes for any review you do. For cubing, sometimes stores like to do test products and stuff like that. Just because they're giving you a free cube does not mean that you have to give it a good grade. In fact, if the cube is really, really bad, then you want to say so, because what you don't want to do is get a cube that's really bad but then say it's good, and then have a ton of people go buy it only to notice that the cube's really not that good, because then it's almost scammy and all of that stuff. So you want to be honest regardless of how you got the cube, whether you paid money for it or if you got it for free. Doesn't matter, you have to be honest. So there are a couple things that I actually really look for in a review, and remember, when you do a review, you're reviewing the cube with the idea that other people are going to possibly buy this. So at least for me, there's a list of things that I always talk about in my reviews. The first and most important thing is actually the price, and a lot of people don't think it's that important, but it is. Cubers are pretty young, and most of us don't actually buy cubes ourselves. We usually ask our parents. I mean, I buy my own cubes, but a lot of you guys who are watching this probably don't. You actually probably ask your parents during Christmas or whatever to get you cubes. And because of that, you want to make sure that people understand the price of cubes when you make reviews. Now for 3x3s, you can probably get by without doing that, because all 3x3s are typically between, say, $5 and $20, and of course the custom ones are more expensive. But when you're talking about Diane cubes, they usually are between $10 and $15, and so maybe it's not so important for 3x3s. But once you get into, say, 4x4s, 5x5s, and then especially the shapeshifters and cuboids and stuff like that, price actually becomes very important. So I always like to be upfront about the price of the cube, because for some people that is the determining factor, and it really doesn't take that long to do anyway. So I don't know why people don't really include the price in the reviews. For my own personal reviews, there are other things that I like to talk about. The first is the sticker and the size. So those are sort of the external things about the cube. Sometimes they're unique, sometimes they're not. And then after that, I actually get into the turning of the cube. So turning, speed, corner cutting, reverse corner cutting, popping, and that's generally it. Now there are very few cubes that are perfect. Usually there will be a cube that has a flaw in one of those categories, and in that case I usually transition into the mechanism. So for instance, if the cube pops a lot, I'll say, yeah, this cube pops a lot, and if we open up the cube you can see why. And then I segue into the mechanism of the puzzle, because some people care about that. And when you do the mechanism, obviously you want to shoot in macro. You don't want to do this blurry stuff. So if you watch the other videos that I've done on Cubing World, you'll know that you want to have something with macro. And you only have to briefly show the mechanism. You don't have to be too detailed. Just show the mechanism and be done with it. And then after that, you can actually conclude the review. So for conclusions, I usually like to do two things. The first thing I like to do is just recommend the cube. So whether or not I recommend the cube, and it's very simple. It's a yes or no type of thing, and I quickly, briefly explain why. And then after that, I move on to the second part of the conclusion, which is the final grade. Now this is where you can be creative. I use a letter grade just like you would in school, but you might want to do some sort of other system like stars or, I don't know, something else. But you want to give a rating so that viewers can actually sort of scale your review. So for instance, if you just say a cube is good, that doesn't mean much. For instance, you could be saying that a cube is good for every cube. And so if they watch all your reviews and all you say is that these cubes are good, people aren't going to know if they really are good. So if you have a rating system, that's going to force yourself to be a little bit more objective, and that's just going to help your viewers understand how good a cube is and not just take your word for it. So that's something to consider. Of course, this is all subjective. You don't have to do anything that I'm saying in this video, but they're just suggestions, and these are things that work for me. That's sort of the general guideline I use for reviews. Now I'm going to be talking about pet peeves, and hopefully you guys can change these things if you're someone who does this, and hopefully this part will be really useful. So the first and biggest pet peeve I have is people making reviews that are too redundant. For instance, if you say a cube is fast, just say the cube is fast. Don't compare it to, say, 5 different cubes. A Xanchi is really fast. I think by now most beekeepers know Xanchis are fast. Don't compare it to a store-bought and say, yeah, it's a lot faster than a store-bought, and it's also a lot faster than my Shengxiao 5x5. You're not adding more information by comparing it to another puzzle. If you do a comparison, just compare it with something that most people have. For instance, don't compare the turning of your square 1 to like a Rex cube, because most people don't have a Rex cube, so that's a stupid comparison. You know, compare the turning and speed of a square 1 to other square 1s. Stuff like that. So make sure your comparisons make sense, but just don't overdo it. And the other thing is, whenever you explain things, don't be too redundant. Now, ironically, in this video I'm being redundant, but that's because I really want to drive a point across. But for reviews, you don't want to do that, because there's just no point. One thing that people do that kind of bugs me is when they talk about corner cutting, they'll slide it so that it's 1 QB, and they'll be like, oh look, it corner cuts this much. And then they'll move it a little bit more, and they'll say, oh look, it corner cuts this much. And they'll just keep doing this. Don't do that. Just go to the maximum corner cutting point, show that the cube cuts right there, be done with it. You don't have to do any more than that. It's just extraneous. And so what this all leads to is actually a video that's shorter, because the biggest peeve I have is actually a review on a Rubik's Cube that's 20 minutes long. I can't stand reviews that are 20 minutes long because there's just no point to it. So by doing the things that I've said in this video, if you watch my reviews, they typically run between 3 minutes and 7 minutes. I typically shoot for around 4 minutes because I think that's kind of a sweet spot for reviews and just videos in general, and I think it's something to work for. If your review is 10 minutes, that's probably okay, depending on the type of review you're doing. For instance, for me, I always do voiceover type reviews, kind of like tech reviews, and so my videos can be a lot shorter because they're somewhat scripted. I know what I'm going to say already. But if your review is something that's more live, like you're actually presenting the cube, then of course it might be longer since you have to think a little bit about what you're going to say. But what comes along with that is make sure you have a good idea of what you're going to say before you start filming. Do not just turn on your camera and start talking about the cube, because you'll stop halfway and be like, I don't remember what else I was going to say. And the other thing you might do is actually start repeating something you've already said. So you might say, oh yeah, this cube turns really well, and then 5 minutes later, oh yeah, I don't remember if I said this, but this cube turns really well. You know, it's just not organized. So keep it streamlined, keep it short and sweet, and I think that'll make a lot of reviews a lot better. It's not a lot of work to make your reviews better. It's just dedication. I mean, you could honestly script your review in like 10 minutes, and it'll just cut down so much of the garbage that you have in some of your reviews. And you know, hopefully that'll just improve your reviews. As a last note that doesn't really fit anywhere else with the rest of this video, when you actually show the cube turning, it's nice to do T-perms and sexy and sledgehammer and all of that, but it's probably best to actually show an example solve where you know you have the over-the-shoulder angle that I talked about in my last tutorial on Cubing World. I think it's just the best way to demonstrate how a cube actually works and how well it works. It's probably just the best way. So hopefully this helps you on your reviews. Again, just like the other videos I make, if you have any questions about anything I've talked about today, leave a comment, I will answer you. And if there is something that I just completely missed in this video, I can also make a separate video answering those questions. So until next time, toodles.